Good morning, everybody. And for those of y'all that are going to download later, which it turns out there's a ton of folks, we have the representative on the line. She should be logging on momentarily. As y'all probably know, we're probably going to cut it a little bit short because she's going to be attending the services for Congressman Turner. And even though it's starting a little bit later, there's a lot of stuff going on. If you haven't been on one of these before, the process is if you have questions, and I sure hope you do, you just type them into the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and get them answered. We'll also have an opportunity. Okay, let's see if Lauren's on there. Apologize, getting a text back from her. We'll also have the opportunity to have this recorded. So like I said, it turns out we got a couple. Oh, she's going to be on her phone, so she's coming on. But anyway, on that, as y'all probably know, we've been able to announce for April 12th a Standing Up for Injustice over right off of West Gray, with honoring the fight that Congress Green has shown us and shown the nation. He'll be joined by Bishop Dixon, the NAACP president, Jean Wu, the chair of the House Democratic Caucus, and Cesar Espinoza, who's president of Fiel, which is, as if you watch Telemundo or Univision, they're out there on the front lines protecting all our communities during these times, particularly targeting not just the undocumented, but really everybody who happens to look like an undocumented. And it's been a tremendous challenge for the community, and they've been one of the leaders in that fight on the ground here in Harris County day after day. We also have our CEC coming up for those of y'all that are precinct chairs, but as you may or may not know, it's open to the public. Any active, well, actually really anybody, but we encourage Democrats of any kind, of any ilk, to join our CEC to kind of see the work. This CEC, in addition to having the normal social hour from 3 to 4 during registration, we also are going to have dinner that's kindly sponsored by our probate and county civil court at laws, dinner and drinks, as soon as the CEC ends, hopefully around 4:45, 5 o'clock. And it's going to be over at Baker Ripley, where we've had it the last 4 times, off of Navigation, the Baker Ripley House on Navigation, within shouting distance of our party headquarters at 3302 Navigation, or I'm sorry, Canal on there. Okay, I apologize for a slight hiccup because I want to make sure that Representative Simmons is getting the right information on here. We also anticipate, in addition to having members of our state legislature, Lizzie Fletcher and, oh, there we go. Bingo. Will be able to join us. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. And I know we're going to be a little pressed for time because you're going to be attending the services. As I don't know if you heard, I had a chance to be up there Wednesday in Austin to see the honor did for him. Obviously, I also very coincidentally was up there a week ago Wednesday when we heard the news. I know, you know, Congressman Turner, Mayor Turner, Representative Turner was someone who you really saw as a mentor. How do you think at this point, you know, putting aside everything, will people recognize his most important accomplishments? I mean, there's so many.
Yes, I mean, just to have a legacy like that is, I mean, what can you say? And I think we've already started to see the way that people are sharing, not just his, notable accomplishments as a legislator, as, the mayor of Houston, but really just to his personal character, who he was as a mentor, who he was as a friend. And I think for any of us, that's absolutely the way that, we want to leave this earth, just by having touched so many lives. And I know that, this is a really hard time for his family. I've lost a parent, and I share with Ashley that your dad loved you so much. And of all the things that he's accomplished, you are absolutely his greatest, accomplishment. And just to be able to hear that, I hope, she understands just how much her father meant to all of us. But yeah, really just sending my love and thinking about the family at this time.
Well, thank you for that. And now you're in, almost 2 months doing this gig. And I think you've probably been asked, including by me, what's it like? I mean, in other words, you've been such an activist, you've been engaged in the political system, but now you're one of the folks people are coming and saying, do something. What's that like?
It's a very different role, but I think it's not really that much different from organizing when you think about what being a legislator is. It's not very much that I can do alone. Like, yes, I have a platform, I have a bully pulpit that I can, use to lift issues and bring awareness to something. But to get the work done of the state, to pass laws, to pass legislation, I have to be able to work with other people and get a majority of people to vote on the things that I want to get passed. And so being able to really, get people on the same page, have conversations, have hard conversations is a part of the job. I'm also a deputy whip for the Democratic caucus. So I literally have the job of helping to organize members of our own caucus to make sure that we're on the same page when it comes to voting on important legislation.
And they're also very cooperative, aren't they?
Yes, you know what? It's so far so good. We've only had really one test, but I think we have the absolute blessing to have Chairman Wu as our leader, in a very, very difficult time. We're 62-88 in a majority, but we've coming into this session, doing as much as we can to push back and fight. It doesn't mean that we have to roll over. You can see it with the voucher fight that's happening right now. We are not backing down. We've been very vocal in our opposition. And so I think, more than anything, this is the opportunity for us to really say, hey, people are looking and wanting to know what Democrats are about, and we're going to show you what Democrats are about in Texas.
Well, and I'll point this out because I mean you're not one to talk up, but being a deputy whip as a freshman is kind of a big deal on it. Is it just because everybody loves you, or just they know your talents?
You know what? I'm just gonna say that this is a hard job, and I feel like I was probably more naive than others to take on such a big responsibility. But I do appreciate, the uplifting, and anything that I can do to help. I think that's just always been my attitude about it. Everybody, um, you know, I think really understands kind of what kind of crisis we're in right now and how important this moment is. And so, whatever we can do to all stay on one page, I'm gonna be sure to do that.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a theme I think for Democrats across the country, but especially in Harris County and Texas. We got to stand together. We can't push any allies away. We can't push any group away. We got to band together because this is the time. This is the Alamo on the other side, west side, but this is it. And we're under attack like we've never been, and we can't push anybody aside, which leads me, by the way, I want to remind folks, if you have questions, just go to the Q&A and we're happy to get them answered, but just type them out there. I haven't seen it yet, but we have another 15 minutes, so don't be shy. You mentioned something at the get-go about having an opportunity, and actually part of your job is to spend time in fellowship with folks that, different backgrounds, hardcore Republicans, Tea Partiers, Trumpsters, whatever. Uh, is that part of the job you enjoy? Tell us about it.
It's it's a very interesting part of the job, but it's something I'm just very used to. I'm a labor organizer by trade, and so it's not all one group of people that you're talking to. Yes, we all have issues as workers, but there were Republicans that I had to work with. There were Christians that I had to work with. There were atheists. There were, leftists in every way, in shape and form. That work that I used to do really, really helps me kind of navigate this very new place that I'm in. And I think what, some of the more veteran members told me coming in is there are going to be some people that you disagree with 99.9% of the time, but there will be that one thing that you're able to align on. And sometimes that is a difference between things that you really care about getting done. And so you never want to, now, you don't tolerate disrespect. You don't move and waver on your values, but there has to be a willingness to have conversations and at least share your values and why you believe a certain way. And sometimes it doesn't change their mind. It doesn't mean every conversation I go into where somebody's so moved by what I said, they say, you know what, I'm going to vote your way, Simmons, or, I agree. But sometimes it could be the difference between them saying, you know what, I won't work against you. I won't block it. I won't stand in the way of it, even if I can't outright support it.
Well, non-opposition is a win in a lot of cases. Just the flip side, is there anything that you've heard about, or an issue that somebody from the Republican Party has said, hey, look, will you consider this that maybe you hadn't heard before that you think might be something worth considering? So, and I'm not saying necessarily because we're in the minority, so it doesn't mean they're coming to you for help, but they might. Has that happened yet, or tell us?
Well, sometimes they'll have, like bills that they want to get passed that are just not really partisan issues on either side. And in a lot of ways, they're kind of pretty like hardcore right wingers who, and they always kind of come to the conversation like, hey, I really want bipartisanship on this. I really would like to have Dems on this. And I think this is something you'll like. So a lot of times I think even for them, they're very cautious of bringing us stuff. Now, there was one incident where we had, a member who was bringing around a card with a very, 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 very controversial piece of, legislation that would have put people in harm's way, but she still wanted to see if, I guess, Democrats would buy it. I don't know if she just didn't want to be rude because we were in the room. And it was very weird, that she would ask us to even consider this piece of legislation. But again, there are a
You've
lot
got
of
me intrigued. I apologize for interrupting, but can you share what this was, or you'd rather not?
it's an anti-LGBT issue, really related to really targeting trans community, and it's just kind of just a common theme that we've seen. And as much as she wasn't even really aggressive about it, it was almost like she really wanted us to consider her position. And so, kind of in the pushing back in that conversation, she was just like, "Oh, okay, well, thank you for listening." And it's like, didn't change her mind, shared, why I thought that was not a good piece of legislation, why that would be harmful, why would, it would have, unintended consequences. But that's just kind of the nature of the game. Like, she wasn't offended by what I said. She just kind of moved on and said hello the next day. And so in some ways, it's one of the strangest environments I've ever been in. But what I really try to bring it back to is people are shaped by their experiences, right or wrong. People are shaped by the environments that have raised them. And so we all represent very different parts of Texas. Even within Harris County, there are no two districts that are really alike. And so I try to not give people a pass on bigoted views, but really try to put myself in their shoes to understand, how did you get to this point? And if it's worth having the conversation, which I think it always is, I don't mind doing that.
Well, that makes sense. So you didn't get invited to be on Fox and Friends.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna extend me, especially after the governor's press office quote tweeted two of my anti-voucher videos. So I don't think I'm in a too good of a place with them right now.
Well, hopefully we shared that or reshared that. And by the way, Lisa McGuire, the only question we have is somebody say thanks for standing strong, which I think we all share. But tell us about those videos, because I mean, voucher obviously, at least from the Republican side, seems to be the only thing that matters in the state is giving free money to people to send their kids to private school, aside from everything else in this state. What's your view on that? Because that's one of the things that everybody who's been on this has talked about.
And I think it's just the hypocrisy, and like what you said, we're willing to give money to children we otherwise don't really do much for. We have some of the highest rates of uninsured children in this state. We have children that go hungry on a daily basis. We had an opportunity in the 88th legislature to extend, food benefits to children over the summer, and we passed on that opportunity. And so it's really frustrating to hear this argument that's made, well, this will help low income children. And I think about, well, what are the other parts of that child's life that we're not doing much about? And so I think we're really seeing kind of some of those hypocrisies really shine through in the way we talk about this bill, even around just the cost. This is not a fiscally conservative bill. This is not really a conservative bill. If anything, it's a vendor bill. And it's interesting to see, who is going to be able to listen to the very loud voices of their constituents, because it's not just Democrats that are against this. This is a bipartisan issue. People are angry about it on both sides, or who is going to bend to the will of the governor when it comes up for a vote.
Well, we're talking the governors, really the two guys that are paying on that. There was something I saw a report that recently came out that talked about who's going to win, and it's obviously not the vast majority of kids. And you've been helping. You were thankfully one of our victory co-chairs this last election. But what it talked about is who's going to profit from this, because there's always, folks that are looking in this for their own pocketbook. Have you seen something that's kind of given you pause about, not just the bad side, but who's running away with money that shouldn't be?
I think we're gonna see people running away with money in a lot of ways, from both sides, from the vendor side, from the curriculum side, but even just these pop-up fly-by-night schools that are gonna end up mostly in our communities. They'll be in my district. Our children are going to get a $10,000 voucher that's not going to get them into the best private schools. It's going to pull resources from the public schools, but those kids will also be locked out of whatever these golden opportunities. But there will be some people who are looking just to make as much money as they can, and they will open schools and storefronts, and our children will be doing packets and worksheets all day, not really getting anything out of it because this is a money grab for a lot of people. In just a general sense, I think we've seen this kind of with vendor legislation being passed in places like Arizona. It's just not good. It's not a good use of resources. It's not like, again, Texas is a Republican state. Fiscal conservatism is a part of their platform, but they're not even abiding by their own guidelines. They don't want guardrails on this bill. They want a universal voucher bill that anybody can get. And that's just really not going to do, it's not going to do anything for our communities, but it's not going to do anything to further ensure that we do our constitutional duty of even funding public education. We can't do both.
Well, and one of the, there's some priority bills that we've asked, and obviously they're aspirational, but you never know. Lightning can strike that Harris County bills. One of them is to basically refund the schools because since 2014, notwithstanding all the money that they've wasted on the, private contractors at the border, about 11.5 billion, our schools have been underfunded. They've been cutting money. Bad things are happening in our public schools across the state. How much of a focus do you think that's going to be that, wait a minute, you've already been defunding the schools for the last 11 years. Why in the world do you want to give away money for free to folks that don't need it?
And, it sounds conspiratorial when you say that,
It's okay if it's true.
But if you're underfunding the schools, you're kind of creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If the schools are underfunded, they don't have the resources to educate children. They don't have the resources to provide the services that are needed for children that are, in a lot of ways, what we say, more expensive to educate. So, and I'll give a personal example. My 10-year-old, my sweet girl is brilliant, but she has a chronic illness and she also has dyslexia. So she requires additional services outside of what, some other students may need. That makes her a little bit more expensive to educate. And so all of those costs, public schools are responsible for one way or another. Public schools are also responsible for providing evaluations for private school and homeschool children. So when you think about just the imbalance within that alone, and if you think about the chronic underfunding of schools, really since 2011, and former State Rep Paul Colbert gives a great presentation on all of this, and you can just really see how no matter how much property tax values go up and how much more we're paying in those taxes, that doesn't necessarily translate into funding for the schools.
Well, and actually, we have a question from our Precinct Chair Support Committee Chair, Alan Gutman. I assume it's Alan G. Could be a rapper, but I think it's Alan Gutman. Asking about what about Abbott coming down on Bel Air High for allowing a student to use preferred pronoun? Isn't that a ridiculous use of state resources? Obviously, at the end of the day, it's choices. When that choice is continually made, what does that tell you about where they're really going?
I think anytime we see those kind of culture war issues be used in a political sense, it's always nonsense. And right now, what you're kind of seeing with the governor in a lot of ways is he's trying to find really very specific, rare instances of things that he knows will incite his base, and specifically in a public school setting, right? Because this is all about making public schools look bad, making public schools look like they can't do the job of educating children, and that parents somehow don't have a choice. And that situation is a very individual situation. I'm sure that child has had conversations with their parents and their caregivers about their own identity. And it's really not something that we should be involved in, especially not the governor of your state. And I can only imagine how that child feels and how that family feels being targeted and being used as that way as a political football because the governor doesn't have the votes that he thinks he has for HB3 to pass.
Well, last session there was a child in your district who I don't think went to Bel Air, but was 12 years old, who kind of became a pawn in some of the legislative stuff going last year, and her mom ended up moving to Colorado. It's kind of amazing when you see the massive resources of the state of Texas and the governor's office focused on one child when we've got all these other issues. And one of those that you mentioned is, and this is another priority bill HCDP is behind, and our delegation, one of our delegates is doing it, and that is we are still leaving money on the table, Medicaid for all. In other words, these are people that are uninsured in the state by choice of the folks that have the ability to do it. How effective do you think that's going to be in making that an issue this cycle, with vouchers and trans stuff being the only thing they seem to care about?
I think that's part of the reason why those really important issues that impact people's everyday lives are pushed to the side. And there's so much focus on the things that divide us, the culture wars, targeting people, targeting vulnerable communities, because you really can't answer, you don't have a good answer as to why you don't want to expand Medicaid. You really don't have a good answer as to why you want to make sure that children and families have access to food. You really don't want to have to answer why you don't want to fully fund public education. And so it's a very easy way. And it's not to say that these issues don't impact real people, because they are, they're really awful, violent issues, but it's also a very easy way for them to be able to go home to their districts, say we fought for you by oppressing or doing whatever, culture war nonsense that kind of gets people riled up, and not have to really answer as to why you're not supporting things that actually make people's lives better.
Well, and actually, I'm at a course that I'm helping out at. One of the issues that we're talking about is it seems we live now in a nation where folks are more, or too many folks are more concerned about punishing someone rather than helping us. And that's a nice frame that you've just raised about, what we're trying to do and what we should be doing. And I think this is a message loud and clear is as Democrats stepping forward to help each other and work together, obviously education funding, Medicare funding. What else do you think, and minimum wage? What else do you think is an issue that there's not just the right thing to do, but if that message gets out that this is what we as Democrats stand for, this is what you're fighting for, where do you think one of those issues are that we haven't talked about?
I think you brought up the most important ones. And I think what we have to do is really make sure that we are the ones that are leading the conversations. I think a lot of times what happens is we get pulled into arguments that Republicans are making because they go after people that we care about. And we have to be able to stand up for people that we care about and stand in front of attacks on vulnerable communities, while also being able to have the same conversation and say, hey, this is why they're doing this. This is why they're going after these people, because they don't want you to be able to retire with dignity. They don't want you to have a living wage. And I think, as we see right now with how frustrated people are with the Trump administration, these massive cuts, Elon Musk rifling around in our Social Security accounts, we have a real opportunity to be able to bridge the gap that maybe people just hadn't been able to see. Sometimes, unfortunately, when people are hurting, they will listen to the loudest voice in the room, and it's not necessarily the voice of reason. And so we have a little bit of a harder job, because it's much easier to point your finger and say, hate this group, they're making your life harder, versus saying, no, actually, this is what is going on with our system, and this is why you're being impacted in this way.
Well, and we have a hardworking staff. Our comms is working with the party locally. What suggestions, recommendations, not just obviously for folks on the ground, but really everybody, because you're right. This is all about framing. Is this a state that only cares about vouchers and suppressing trans kids, or is this a state that cares about funding education, funding insurance, and making sure people are taken care of? What's your recommendation? Because you're reading crazy stuff, you're hearing crazy stuff on a day-to-day basis. What do you recommend?
Meeting people where they are. And again, being the louder voice of the room. We have to be proud about who we are. We have to be loud on our issues. And we also have to be consistent with our messaging. I can give an example of, some things that I've seen when a lot of times where Republicans are being pressed about the voucher conversation, where their communities are coming at them left and right on social media, they'll very conveniently shift the conversation to, oh, there's men in the bathroom at the Capitol, right? Like we've seen that happen over the past couple of weeks. And it's not to say that they're not.
Pardon me, which Republican was that?
I
No,
don't want to go
no,
into
no, no, no.
yeah.
I wasn't even talking about that. I was talking about which Republican man was in the bathroom.
Oh, see, look at you being, you know what? I see you, and I'm laughing with you, but just in those incidents, right? It's not to say that they don't absolutely believe those things, that they're not, transphobic, but they're very good at being able to shift the conversation to something that they know will incite their base. And we have to be very, very, very clear about, we're not abandoning people. We're not saying that those issues don't matter, but this is why they're having that conversation. This is why they want you emotional about something that just really doesn't have much to do with you, and using the most inflammatory descriptions that they can use, because they know how to kind of play on people's emotions, and they've been very successful at it, as we can see.
Well, and actually, Lisa had a question, which I think is right there is, when I speak to voters, can I describe the ESA voucher bill as a vendor bill that's a money grab for certain private individuals when we have surplus billions? Is that part of the truth, the whole truth, or a truth?
That, you know what, that feels like you're hitting the nail on the head. And I would always tell people, this is, you can look at who's opposed to the bill and you can look who's for it. And I think it tells a real story of who this bill is actually for, who this bill is actually going to help.
Well, and Jeremy actually pointed out that what you were really emphasizing is it's not just important to say they suck, they're doing all this bad stuff. It's important to kind of say this is what we stand for.
Mhm.
And, from a big picture, as we wrap, because I know you got a lot of stuff today, important stuff, big picture, what's your best hope for this session? Because I think it's helpful in this state and in this world to say, you know what, we got some things worth fighting for, and I'm hopeful about what.
I'm really hopeful that we defeat the voucher bill. That's absolutely what I'm laser focused on. I have some things that I'm really working on that I would love to see. I want to get a sickle cell registry passed. I want to, make sure that we're expanding access to healthcare. I want to ensure that people have access to food in their communities. Those are some things that I think for me are not Democrat or Republican issues. Those are issues that we should be able to agree on and work on behalf of the people in our state. And so I'm an organizer, I'm a labor organizer in Texas. So I have to operate at a certain level of delusion to be able to, dream big and think that we can, accomplish our goals. And so again, I'm not gonna get cynical. I'm gonna take that attitude with me very much into being a legislator and really figure out how I push people in the right direction on issues that matter for our state.
Well, and you mentioned several times, the fact that we have hunger in our communities. Is there a specific bill or bills that we might want to focus on as a party, as a local party that you've got in mind?
Well, I have a bill where I would like there to be tax credits for, people to open up grocery stores and make sure there's access to fresh food in our state. I think if you look on the bills that have been filed in the last few weeks, you'll see that there's been a lot of intentional focus from Democrats specifically on very, very key issues that matter. So like food access. I think there's a number of Medicaid expansion bills. There's a lot of bills that are targeting maternal mortality, the things that we're hearing from our community where people are saying, hey, this matters to me. Hey, this has happened to me. And so, again, I think sometimes there's a disconnect between what's happening in the legislature and kind of what's happening on the ground. And so my ask is, to people that are dialed in, people like you, people who, have the ear of the community, say, hey, look, Representative Simmons has this bill that would do this. Let's really see how we can help. Maybe we can sign up to testify. Hey, Representative Ann Johnson is working on this piece of legislation, and this is really, really good, not just for Harris County, but for everyone in Texas. Really making sure that, our voices are just as loud in the room, because what I've noticed is, the other side, Republicans, are doing a very good job of organizing their people. And not to say that their issues are better than ours, but they're just better communicated. And a lot of times it's the squeaky wheels that get the oil. And I want us to be the squeakiest wheels in the room.
Well, we'll try our best to be squeaky next week, and obviously we hope we have a chance to hear from you again in a couple months as the session's ending, and you're still as hopeful and not cynical. But in terms of big picture, we have kind of community events, engagement. Next week we have and we've been doing this for several months. It's going to be an A-Leaf Community Garden. We have the CEC next week. We just announced April 12th, Stand Up for Injustice with Congressman Al Green. There's a lot of opportunities to get out there, and thank you for all you're doing, and we hope to see you again.
All right. Thank y'all so much. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.